But just before James starts, I'm going to hand over to Laura quickly. Laura is the editor-in-chief of the journal, co-editor-in-chief with Dima Rufai, and Laura is going to say hello to us. Laura?
Thank you very much, Doyen. I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for joining this this webinar. I am, as Doyen said, one of the two editor-in-chiefs of the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And we are, as you'll know, we're a high-quality academic journal in the field of entrepreneurship, innovation and small firms. But we also like to think of ourselves as a safe space for academics. We've all had those experiences with the peer review process that have been difficult or challenging and unnecessarily so. So we take our peer review process very seriously, and we like to have peer reviewers who are compassionate and who know what it's like to be that academic writing a paper. So the fact that you've come on this webinar suggests that you're keen and you're interested to become involved as a peer reviewer, and we're really, really grateful for that, because it is one of those academic jobs that almost nobody thanks you for, but it's just so important. The session is going to be led by Dr. James Cunningham from Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, and he himself is specialist in family firms and creative entrepreneurship. And he chairs the Institute for Small Businesses Special Interest Group on Family and Community entrepreneurship. And so from that point of view, he is an extremely experienced researcher and publisher. And so he has been through the processes of learning how to be a peer reviewer, and now acts for us as an associate editor in the journal. And I know that he is involved in various other journals' editorial boards too. So a very experienced person. So I want to just say from the journal more generally, thanks to James for facilitating this event. And then obviously, of course, always Dr. Doyen Olorunfemi from the University of Sunderland, who is also one of our associate editors at the of Outreach and Engagement and Media. And I just wanted to say on behalf of myself and Dima and all of the editorial leadership, thank you so much once again for making this happen. So I will leave you with that in James's capable hands.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura, and thanks for joining us as well and introducing the journal a little bit. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to pull up my slides, if you can keep me right, in case there's any sharing issues. Okay, you should be able to see my slides now. Please let me know if you can't. All right, first of all, I'll introduce myself just a little bit. I recognise quite a lot of names in the people list, in the participants list here, so thanks very much for coming, those of you that know me. For most of you, though, I think maybe we've not come across each other before. So as Laura said, my name's James Cunningham. I'm at Robert Gordon University here in Aberdeen. I'm an associate professor in entrepreneurship. I've been here for 11 years now, and before that I was a lecturer in management in Bamberg in Germany. So I've kind of got around a little bit. In terms of being involved in academia on reviewing, because as Laura said, reviewing is a thing that nobody really ever thanks us for. It also seems to be the thing that no one ever really trains us on, and no one ever really tells us how to do. And I'm not going to be as patronizing or as arrogant as to say that this session is going to tell you how to be a reviewer, but it's certainly going to talk through some of the main stages. And I hope that by the end of it, we reiterate the reason why we do reviewing and why peer reviewing is so important, and why we at the journal would absolutely love you to become more involved in peer reviewing. We need good reviewers. Journals like ours can't exist without good peer reviewers. We can't exist without authors, of course, but we certainly can't exist without reviewers. And we'll explain a bit of why that's the case as we go through this. I've got quite a few things I want to cover with you. I'm keen not to make this too lectury. I try and make this as engaging as possible because we've probably got quite a lot of reviewing experience in the room already. So please, maybe as we're going through things, use the chat to give some of your own experiences. And what we'll do is we'll try and save at least 10, 15 minutes at the end to be able to um, yeah, to be able to just discuss these experiences. I'll be sharing my own experiences, but if you can maybe share some of yours also, that would be great, whether as an author or as a reviewer. For my own review work, obviously, I'm associate editor of International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I'm also on the editorial board for Entrepreneurship and Regional Development, and I consistently review for the Academy of Management for the Entrepreneurship Division and for the Critical Management Studies Division. And the reason why I do that and why I've focused on particular journals to review for are because these are my aspirational journals as an author. These are the journals I want to get involved in. These are the journals I enjoy. These are the journals that I have developed a lot of my research through reading and through engaging with. And also, particularly with the Academy of Management reviewing that I do, it exposes me to new work. It exposes me to new things, maybe arguments I haven't thought of before, maybe theories I haven't heard of before. So reviewing, I see reviewing not just as part of my duty as an academic to review papers and maintain the quality of papers, but I see reviewing as part of the way in which I become a better academic myself, and I develop new ideas and new ways of thinking. So I'll talk you through a little bit of that as well. And again, just to reiterate, I'd love to hear some of your own experiences as we go through things. Just very quickly, I think Laura already touched on some of this. The journal itself, we're a strong journal in that we've tried to cover a lot of different bases of entrepreneurship. We've got a lot of varied expertise in the editorial board, and that's a good thing. Starting with having joint editors in chief who focus on different areas. We try to cover different methods. We've got qualitative specialists, quantitative specialists, etc. And my own background being in mixed methods, and I know a few of us do the same thing. So we've tried to build the editorial board with that in mind, trying to cover as many different angles on entrepreneurship as possible. I will be sharing these slides with you all after the session also. The other thing that we like to focus on is the international aspect. Now, a lot of journals, if not the majority of journals, have the word international at the beginning of their title. And once you dig into the journal, maybe you don't really see them as being international. They're based in the nation that they were founded in, usually. But we really focus on trying to spread the perspectives that we bring into the journal. Yes, we're UK based, as in the editorship is based in the UK at the moment. But in terms of our authors, there's a very broad scope of international mix. And in terms of our reviewers, we importantly try to have a very broad scope on an international mix in terms of the reviewers that we get in. The journal itself was founded in the year 2000 by Gerard McKelvey, who I just spoke to the other day about this session. And more recently, we've developed into having at least 3 different kinds of paper. We have our classic research papers, which we look at being around 8,000 words for the initial submission. We have our teaching case studies, which are around 7,000 words with teacher instructions, etc. They're a very different beast from the research paper, the classic research paper, but they can be really fun things to write and fun things to get involved in, and good because the vast majority of people who write about research also write about entrepreneurship, they also teach entrepreneurship. So it's a good way of getting some outlet for your case studies. And we also have the Fresh Perspective Research Notes. This is something that's particularly designed for early career researchers, early career authors. They are perspective articles, essays, if you like, statements of intent, you could see them as, from early career researchers, 2,000 words, which I personally find incredibly difficult to write anything shorter than maybe it normally would be. But they're a useful way to get your voice out there and to be supported. Now, that's a little bit of the journal. I didn't want to labour that too much. As Laura said, what we try to do is, yes, publish the highest quality entrepreneurship research that we possibly can, but we also try to be this safe space for developing researchers. And I'm not going to always say early career researchers necessarily, but researchers that are pushing their work forward, maybe even researchers that are making new arguments to the field that maybe the more um, higher ranked journals, the ETPs, the JBVs of the world, maybe won't be more willing to accept because they're slightly left field arguments, slightly alternative perspectives. It is something that we try to be safe for, this idea of non-orthodox views. So we encourage critical perspectives in entrepreneurship. We encourage interdisciplinary approaches. We like theories that draw from management theories, other disciplines in the social sciences, anthropology, sociology, psychology. These all give us different views on what entrepreneurship is all about and how entrepreneurship happens. And what that means for the journal is that we need to deal with all these different views. So we can't just have a stock of reviewers that are good at one thing. We can't even just have a stock of reviewers that are only good at entrepreneurship. We need our reviewers to be more diverse in nature. And it's our job as editors and associate editors to piece together reviewer teams. And for that reason, we've got events like this, which hopefully pull in new reviewers to the journal from different backgrounds. So the fact that just looking down the participant list for this event here, the fact that they're all from different, all the participants here are from different geographical locations is already an indication that we're starting to be a bit more diverse in our reviewer pool, as we call it. And this is what we end up with. We end up with papers that touch on all sorts of different things. Entrepreneurship in atypical settings, maybe constrained or marginalized contexts, maybe from the so-called developing economies, whereas most of our entrepreneurship theories have been based in arguably the US and Europe. That's where they emanated from in the 60s and 70s. These theories that we still typically deal with, they don't necessarily fit in different other contexts. We want to pull them in. Gender in entrepreneurship. Gender's a huge issue in entrepreneurship and it's becoming more complex. Gender itself is becoming more complex. What does that mean for how entrepreneurs go about things? What entrepreneurship does? How can we measure what entrepreneurial success is? Is it just about making money? Is it just about making profit? I would argue absolutely 100% not. But if that's the case, how do we then measure entrepreneurship success? And it brings us to ethics, issues of morality, issues of even legal versus illegal entrepreneurship, if it can be as simple as that, and maybe we can't. Social entrepreneurship, social innovation, what is innovation itself? How do business models innovate? How do we collaborate? How do small businesses collaborate and work together when actually everything they've ever learned has been trying to make them more competitive and compete rather than collaborate? And what does this mean for the globalized world? That's a lot of bullet points and that's a lot of different ideas, but you can see what we need to deal with as an editorial team is different papers, and we need different expertise in our reviewer pool to help us to judge these papers and to judge whether they're appropriate for the journal or not, and to judge whether they are of good quality that we would want the paper to be in the journal. And that's not a judgment on the person writing the paper, but our job as reviewers, our job as editors, is to help the paper become as strong as it possibly can be. As an author, and we all know this, we all try to be authors in this game of academia, we know that we should be trying to pick a journal that is credible and recognised, and particularly internationally. That's what we aspire to be, and that's what we are at the journal here. Our credibility, though, only comes through peer review, and without the peer review process, we don't have that credibility. Without the credibility, we wouldn't be recognised, and certainly not internationally. Authors will try to aim high. They will try to go for the highest rank journal that they can, but authors also have to be realistic and they have to see where does their paper fit? What conversations does their paper add to and fit with? And as reviewers, That's what we look for. We look for the paper to add to the conversations that are already taking place in the journal. And that means citing the journal. That means papers that actually look back on what has appeared in the pages of Entrepreneurship and Innovation and how their work adds to it. So, who are the key authors that they're engaging with? Where has their work been published? If you're a clever author and you're thinking about where to put your paper, you should have been thinking, am I citing the authors that have already been in this journal? So as a reviewer, that's also what we should be looking for in the paper. How has your target journal already engaged with the theoretical angle that you're using? If it has, what are you adding to it? Are you just saying the same thing again? Because if you do, as a reviewer, I wouldn't necessarily be that flattering of such a paper. If your target journal has not engaged with the theoretical angle at all, why are you bringing it to the journal? Why do you think, as an author, this is a good thing to bring? What are the methodological traditions of the journal? I've already said that our journal likes to publish the broad scope, the broad church of methodological approaches, and that means we're perhaps more open in nature to different methodological choices. Other journals will be more quants in nature. Other journals, again, might be more qual in nature, but you need to navigate that landscape as an author. How does your paper's method fit? The reason I'm going through these issues that authors need to think about is because we replicate them as reviewers. When we're reading the paper that gets submitted, we need to start to think, has the author thought about all these things? Does this paper fit with the journal and fit with what we expect from the journal? So we expect, as reviewers, we expect a certain level of author etiquette. We expect the paper submission to contribute to the journal's conversations about a topic. Do they cite work previously appearing in the journal? Do they connect with the main authors and the main theories that are common in the journal? And what do they do with those theories? Do they just replicate them again? That's perhaps not as strong. Do they push them forward to an extent? That's better. That's what we're looking for. Do they relate to previous calls for future research? Almost all articles that we publish in the journal will end with, what does this mean for future researchers? What are we calling for as an author of this journal? What are they calling for in terms of future research? If you can connect to that, if your paper that you're reading as a reviewer connects to that, then you're in a good space with it. You're in a good place in terms of seeing how it contributes to the ongoing journal discussion. And that's the way that I would like all reviewers to look at it. The journal is an ongoing discussion. Published 4 times a year with a number of papers in each issue, the journal just continues the same conversation, but it goes more in depth. It progresses the conversation. It pushes the journal's conversation forward. That's what you're looking for papers to do. Titles can be deceiving. You do need to ensure the paper fits, not just that the title of the paper fits with what we would expect, but that the actual paper itself fits. Look for methodological preferences, look for disinclinations in the journal. We try to be as open as possible. If someone has submitted a paper that's a bit of a quirky new method, we're accepting of that, but the author needs to explain clearly why this method was appropriate for the paper and why this method works for what the author is trying to say. We expect our authors to read the author guidelines, and therefore we would hope that our reviewers would read the author guidelines also and be aware of the author guidelines. We get quite a lot of papers submitted that are just not formatted in the way that we would expect at all, and the format is laid out in the author guidelines. Now, what that tells us is that the author has not read the author guidelines, and if they've not read the author guidelines, we question, why are they submitting to this journal? So the signs are bad if even the format doesn't necessarily fit with the author guidelines. But to know that, you need to know what those guidelines are. Things like word count, I'm going to return to later. Word count can be an issue. We can't go over word count for various reasons that I'll tap into a bit later on, but you need to watch for that as the reviewer, because that again is a suggestion. that they've maybe submitted that to a different journal, been rejected, and have just gone and put it straight into this journal, and that's not necessarily what we're looking for. Think about how they've written the paper. Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it reflexive in places, but then more objective in other places? We accept all different versions, but the consistency here is key. Are they all, is the author all over the place in the paper? It switches from third person to first person. It needs to flow. We need, as reviewers, to always think about the reader. We want the reader to enjoy the papers of the journal, and they're not going to enjoy a paper that is switching voice all the way through the work. So the reviewer has to look at that and has to think about that as they're going through it. Review how the data is presented in the journal. What do we normally expect in terms of tables, figures, how quotes are used if it's a qualitative piece of work? We would expect a commonality. In a new paper submission, there'd be some common ways of formatting data if they're using empirical data that has appeared before. And this is great advice for authors, but it's also great advice for reviewers, because that's what we would like you to be looking for as a reviewer. So I've gone through that quite quickly because I don't want to talk too much about how to help authors. I want to talk about how to help reviewers, because that's what we're looking for. The first thing a reviewer should look at is what I call the anatomy of a paper. What are the bits, and are they there? What are the bits of the paper that I'm looking for? Do I see them? Am I not clear where they are? If I'm not clear where all the various bits are, then our reader's not going to enjoy it, because it's not what they expect to be seeing. We need an introduction, we need a literature review. The author should be helping the editors choose the right reviewers, because they should be quite clear what their paper's all about. Now, they should be engaging with the conversation, as I've said. They should be contributing to a narrative. The introduction, especially, and to the literature review, by the end of that, as a reviewer, you should be absolutely clear on what this paper is trying to do. You won't be at the stage yet of being able to say, have they done it well or not? But you should be clear what the paper is trying to do. What's the gap that they're trying to address? Are they trying to provide evidence to something that didn't have evidence before? Are they trying to give a new area of knowledge or develop a new area of knowledge? Are they trying to give practical information on how a theory applies in practice? Is this a methodological paper where they're giving a new methodology and trying to justify and perhaps even validate a new methodological approach? Are they providing more empirical data where there was a lack of empirical data? Is there a new theory that they're trying to build into things? Or is this a new population? Is this a new type of entrepreneur that we've not seen before? Is this a new context in which we've not investigated entrepreneurship before? By the end of the introduction and the literature review, the reviewer should be absolutely clear on that. And if they're not, that's a problem with the paper that maybe we want to bring up in our review. The method, is it robust? Is it a good, clear description? Method sections can become very descriptive, and it is a bit of a shame because the method can also be used as a contribution, but we're looking for that description because what that does is it gives us faith that this work has been done appropriately and that this work has been done by good professional researchers, because that's the type of research we want. So we want a description of the approach. We want a description of the sample. How was the field work done? How was the analysis done? And this is something that gets missed quite a lot in papers. They don't explain to the reviewers or indeed the readers, how was the analysis actually done? Don't just tell us, oh, there's a thematic analysis and here it is. Well, how did you go about that as authors? That's what you should be looking for in the paper. And ethically, what's your read on that as a reviewer, if this work was ethically done or not? Have you got any question marks? Have you got anything that you might want to raise? Now, when you write a review, there will be a place for you to write your comments to the author, and then there'll be a place for you to write your comments to the editor. And it might be that if you've got ethical concerns about a paper, but you're not sure, you don't necessarily want to raise it with the author because you're not sure. You don't want to claim something that is incorrect to them, but you might want to raise it to the editor just to have a think about any ethical issues that you might have seen in the methods. Because the last thing the journal would want would be to be behind publishing potentially unethical work. Findings, are they clear? Are they credible based on what the research has done? Are they linked back to the gap? Are they linked back to the introduction? Make sure that the back end of the paper fits the front end of the paper. It should be a self-contained argument. And that feeds into the conclusions. What contribution is being made? What type of contribution is it? Is it based on this gap that they've seen? Do they reconnect with the introduction? And what are the implications for policy and practice? That's the anatomy that we look for. Again, we're not really in a place to say whether it's been good or bad, but we're looking for these as kind of base level expectations of a paper. So why do we then engage in a review of it? Why do we then write a review of it? Well, peer review is what brings academic research forward. It's what pushes it forward. It's what makes it better. Papers will be submitted, and yes, they're the final product at the time the author submits it, but even the author knows it's not quite at the point of being the final product. It's not quite the best that the paper can be. The review process then pulls it forward. It makes it better. And as a reviewer, you're not named. You're never going to be a co-author on this paper. You get very, very little acknowledgement of actually contributing to the paper, but you are a massive contribution to the paper and you really develop the work. So what you're doing as a reviewer is you're developing the field. You're developing these papers that appear on the pages that the authors have put forward. You help us achieve certain quality standards. We need to know that the work is good. So if you're an expert in a particular theoretical area, we'll come to you and we'll say, can you look at this paper? It's in this theoretical area. We'd really appreciate your opinion. As a reviewer, you're not making the decision on the paper necessarily. That goes back to the associate editors and editors. But you're offering your expertise, and we will use that expertise because we might not have the expertise ourselves. So we rely on the reviewers bringing that. Peer review ensures that we've got that integrity in the publishing process. Our articles in academic journals, our articles are the scholarly record. They are the record of how thought and understanding has developed. We need to know that that is with integrity. Otherwise, we could all just publish our own blogs on the internet somewhere and just publish our monographic writings in blogs and write whatever we want. We need to maintain a quality control, and peer review is how we're maintaining that quality control. It's the filtering process and the revision advice that we give as reviewers when we write our reviews. They help improve the final article. Authors will almost always be thankful for the reviews that they get, even if they don't maybe realize that when they get the review, because they just want their article to be accepted. But ultimately, authors will almost always realize that the paper is better as a result of having gone through the review process and the revision process. And that's the role you play. And that's why it's so important in making entrepreneurship research better. What about you, though? I get the sense that a lot of people are maybe on this call and maybe interested in being a reviewer because partly you need to be selfish. You need to think about your own career development. We say we're a safe space for people at this journal. Absolutely. I'd say we also see ourselves as a safe space to help develop people and develop them in their career and pushing themselves forward. As a peer reviewer, you contribute directly to the development of your field. And in promotion applications and job applications, you can say that. If you're a reviewer for a particular journal, that shows that you are open to pushing the field forward, not just taking from the field, but actually contributing and pushing it forward. And in a way, selflessly contributing to the field in that review capacity. I personally found that reviewing helps me keep up to date with the field, especially reviews of papers that I might not normally have been interested in, papers I wouldn't normally have read in in the contents pages of a journal. If I'm forced, in inverted commas, if I'm forced to review it, it makes me take a deep dive into an area that I might not have seen before. And that helps me to sit back and think, what direction is this field going in? It helps keep me stay up to date. You improve your ability to write. I started reviewing long before I started writing, and I became a much better writer as a result of increasing my review activity, because you can see what the good habits are and the bad habits are of authors. So it helps you become a better writer. It increases collaboration with journal editors like myself, like Laura, like Doyen, and like the other associate editors of this journal. And that then can result in maybe enhanced opportunities in the future, perhaps invitations to join editorial boards. The review process for this journal is essentially the same as the review process for other peer-reviewed journals. So once you do it here, you can start to do it for other places. The only advice I would give on that is be selective in the journals that you review for. Make sure it's the journals that you want to appear in yourself. Make sure it's the journals you want to take part in. Don't make the mistake of reviewing for everyone that ever asks you, because then you end up reviewing for all sorts of different journals and you're not focused and you're not targeted. I find it much easier personally. I found it much easier to stay focused on a few journals that I know them well. I know their literature well. I know their methods well. It makes me a better reviewer. And on that flip side again, it also makes me a better author because I know the landscape of those journals. It gives you an understanding of the publication process. Reviewing helped me realise why my papers were getting rejected. And it wasn't because the research was bad, it was for the common reasons why reviewers reject papers. And I was able to fix that in my own work. I'm not that generous that I will share exactly what that was, but for you, it will be something different. As you review, you'll start to realise your own bad habits in writing. You gain recognition for peer review. You're not named as a peer reviewer, but there's all sorts of ways of gaining recognition. There are counters now. There are credibility scores on your ORCID ID on Web of Science, for example. You can opt into getting credit for your reviews, and that's just a number, a metric that ticks up. And we also periodically give credit to our team, our pool of peer reviewers in the journal. So with the quality controllers, we make sure the research being published is good quality. Without that, our journal wouldn't stand up the way it does stand up. So we're incredibly grateful for that. A quick timeline of what review is. Now, I appreciate a lot of you might know this already. Some of you won't though. And it's good to remind ourselves of whose role is which in the journal process. So we've got our submission site that we use for authors. An author will submit a paper. So they'll submit a paper here as the very first stage in what they would do. That goes to the editor, one of our editors-in-chief, and that will then be passed to an associate editor. Now, the first thing we do, as usually the associate editor would do this, is we're checking for word count. We're checking for some connection to the journal, and we're checking for format and structure. We are reading the article at that stage, but we're not necessarily deep reading the article because we might not have that theoretical expertise, that methodological expertise, or that topic expertise. We need reviewers for that. But at this stage, we're just checking that this paper complies with our guidelines. It's what we normally expect from the journal. Does it fit? Is it related to entrepreneurship? After we realize, yes, this does comply with what we expect in terms of word count, connection, and format, we look for, does this paper fit with the aims and the scopes of the journal? Is it related to entrepreneurship? You would be surprised how many papers we get that are not related to entrepreneurship at all. Now, given we're an entrepreneurship journal, we really need papers that are related to entrepreneurship. As a reviewer, you won't get those papers because the associate editor has already made that judgment. Yes, this feels like it fits with entrepreneurship. Is it appropriate for the journal? the associate editor will have made a call on that saying, this feels like it is appropriate for the journal. I'm not saying at that stage whether it's a good paper or a bad paper. Is it appropriate? Yes, it feels appropriate. At that point, if I'm happy as associate editor, and we've got a number of associate editors, but me as associate editor, if I'm happy here, this paper complies with our journal guidelines, it fits with the aims and the scope of the journal, I then say, I am not going to desk reject this paper. I am going to put it out to review. If I desk reject the paper at this stage, I then deal with the desk rejection as the associate editor, and I recommend that communication to the author. And that's disappointing news to the author, of course, but 9 times out of 10, they've not aligned it to the journal, so they kind of know themselves that they weren't really going to get out to review for the journal. If I decide, no, I'm happy with all of this, I want this to go out to review, I then select reviewers. Now we try, at our journal, we try to select at least 2 or 3 reviewers. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you now, finding reviewers can be tough. People are busy. People are busy writing their own papers. People are busy with their teaching. People are busy with their admin more and more these days. So it can be tough to find reviewers. The best way for an associate editor to find reviewers is to give potential reviewers a paper that they will be interested in. How do I do that? I use the keywords that the reviewer has given us in the system when they've signed up to become a reviewer. So keywords are important. I used to make the mistake of just putting in any word, entrepreneurship, family, social. It's too broad. Be quite tight on and be careful and considered with the keywords that you choose. The other way that I go about finding good reviewers is I look at their previous publications in the journal. So say someone submits a paper on succession in family business as an entrepreneurship argument. I'll look into the journal and I'll search the journal for, well, who's written on this in the past 5 years or so? And I'll find a couple of authors and I'll then contact them through my system and see if they want to review this paper. I can also look to see who has this paper cited from the journal, and I'll use that to then find a good reviewer. And sometimes there are just people who I know will be good reviewers because they've got the expertise for the paper and I know them through my own network or my own experiences with them. And I send it out to review. At this point, you as a reviewer, you've not seen the paper yet. The first thing you'll see is you'll get an email. You'll get an email because I've, as associate editor, determined that you are a potential reviewer, good reviewer for this paper. And you can accept or you can decline that invitation to review. Hopefully, if you accept the invitation to review because you've read the title, you've read the abstract of the paper and you think, yep, I've got the expertise to review this paper, then you'll take a note of the deadline that we want you to stick to. It's usually around 2 weeks. If you want to review the paper but you can't stick to the deadline that we give you, please just tell us. Please just get in touch and say, I will review this paper, but it's not going to be until this date. If that works for us, we can put an extension on your review. We can do that. So it stops you getting chaser emails. It stops the system automatically discounting you as a reviewer because you can't meet it by the deadline. So please just do get in touch if that becomes the case. The paper, if you agree to review and you've taken a note of the deadline, you're happy with it, it will then appear in your reviewer center in the journal. By that point, you'll have been registered in the journal. You'll have your login and your ID. You then write and you submit your review and you make a recommendation to me, the associate editor. And that recommendation is accept, revise and resubmit with minor revisions, revise and resubmit with major revisions, reject and resubmit, or reject outright. You're not making the decision to the author. That's something I was always nervous about as a reviewer. I don't want to reject a paper. I don't want to be the person making that decision. Also, I don't want to accept a paper because I don't want to take responsibility for it. You're not making the decision. You don't have the responsibility for the final decision. That comes back to the editor. So don't worry about that. And remember, the editor has at least 2 or 3 reviewers' recommendations to take into account. So it's not just your word that's the final word. It's a very important word that you're giving, but it's not the final word. What does a good review look like? About 5 to 10 main comments on average per manuscript. That would be normal, I would say. That would be average. Do number your comments. Don't just give us bullet points, but give us point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. That's useful because when the authors have to respond to the comment, they can tell you which number of comment they're responding to. And it makes it easier to track things for the author and then for the reviewer when they come to read it again. I find it quite useful to split a review into main comments and maybe minor comments. So minor comments might be things like word choice and spelling and maybe formatting, or maybe splitting a paragraph into 2 because the paragraph's too big. These are minor things. Other more main things, more major things, if you like, might be things like, I don't think you've chosen the right theoretical framework. Your data doesn't really speak to what you are claiming it speaks to. Your method needs more description. It needs more detail. These are quite major things for the author to deal with. Always provide reasoning and constructive suggestion in your review. Don't just leave it as this paper wasn't good enough. We've had that before from reviewers. We've had one-line reviews in the past saying there is no contribution in this paper, therefore I recommend reject. As an editor, we cannot use that review. That is not a useful review. We need constructive comments. We need reasoning. Even if your recommendation is to reject, give us a reason for that. If your recommendation is to accept, give us a reason for that. Let us know what you're thinking. You might want to point the author in the direction of some literature, preferably literature from the journal, because we focus quite a lot on continuing the conversation. There is, as I've mentioned before, there is a space for you to provide confidential comments just to the editor. Please do that. This can be really useful. Please don't give us a full 4 or 5 pages of confidential comments. Just give us a short paragraph. What do you think about this paper? Is this something you would read if you were a reader of the journal? Is it something you would expect to find? Do you have any concerns about the paper that you didn't want to share with the authors? Be clear on what you're recommending to the editor. Don't necessarily sit on the fence with a paper. Just tell us outright, look, I don't think this paper's good enough for this journal. I don't think it's going to get there necessarily. It needs to think about this and this and this and this, and that's just too much work at this stage for the authors. That's good for the editor. It helps us make a decision. That's also good for the authors at times because it helps them think about, did we really put this into the right journal? Is there maybe another journal that is more appropriate for this paper? And by far, as an associate editor of this journal, by far the most important thing you can do as a reviewer is get your review back on time. And if you're not going to get your review back on time, just tell us that you're not getting it back on time so that we know when to expect it. The worst thing for an author, and you'll all recognize this, the worst thing for an author is when you submit a paper and you wait and you wait and you wait, and then you keep waiting. We want to get the process done as quickly, but as of high quality as possible. I'll give you an indication of timelines a little bit later. I realize I'm pushing on time myself. I wanted to share an example with you. This is one of my own reviews that I wrote of a paper from years ago, right? So this doesn't betray any confidentiality or anonymity. This is from years ago. I dug this out from my archives. Yes, I am that sad. I do keep all the reviews that I write for journals. But I thought this was a decent example when I looked at it. So you don't need to read it, of course, right? But have a look at the structure here. You start with thanking the author for the opportunity to read their paper. This author has submitted their paper. They're probably very nervous that people are going to be reading the paper, so thank them for that. Tell them a little bit about what's good about the paper. By the time you see a paper as a reviewer, it will be decent enough. because the editor has already decided they would like an expert to look at this because they've decided there could be some value here. That doesn't mean automatically every paper should be accepted ultimately, but it means it's good enough to go into the review process. So what is good about it? Without question, you'll see some issues that need to be addressed. So then you start listing them. And like I said, you could go major and minor issues, or main issues is maybe a bit more subtle than major issues. But number those points. You can see that there's actually quite a lot of words here. Say point number 1. There's the strongest element of the paper, but it needs more work. It could be the main contribution of the paper. It could contrast with another theory, a life cycle approach. Tell the author what you think could be improved here for each one. At times I struggle to see the contribution. Give them some quotes from their own paper to say this bit didn't quite make sense, it didn't quite work for me. Importantly for the authors, point to the page you're talking about. You could even point to the paragraph you're talking about, or even the line in the paper that you're talking about. I continue to do that through name the pages, etc. And then you can see I've got 6 main points that I wanted to raise. Number 5 to 10 is a good number. And then I've got a number of smaller points. These are things that can be fixed very quickly by the authors. These are things that will take more time. I've also at one point asked the authors to consider Wang and Chu from 2014. It's actually from International Journal of Management Reviews for this review, but that was a reference for them. Try not to give them maybe too many references. You don't want them just to write the paper exactly the way you would have written it as a reviewer, but you maybe want to give them some suggestions that might help them improve their arguments. And then I always like to give a little summing up at the end because it's niceties. Be kind. Show them that you as a reviewer are a human being too. Now, a lot of people I show this to when I'm showing people how to review, they don't realize there's quite so many words, or there can be quite so many words involved in a review. But particularly if it's the first review of a paper, you want to give good constructive feedback. It can take you time. A good review can take you an hour, 2 hours to do for this journal. So please do take a little bit of time over it and give the authors something to work with. They will respond to this. If they get a revised decision, they'll have to respond to this. So give them individual points to actually respond to, not just this bit's not good enough. That doesn't give them anything to work with. I'm not going to run through these questions because this is actually from Sage themselves that offer this advice, but there are some useful questions you can ask of a paper. Does the introduction set the scene? Are all the necessary procedures followed for the method as you would expect them to be? If you're not familiar with the method, tell the editor that also in the editor comments. I've reviewed the paper, but it is a new method to me. Hopefully the editor has been smart and has given at least one of the reviewers a paper that is a method they're familiar with. If it's quant-based, do the numbers make sense? You're not going to redo all the calculations, of course, but are they logical? Is there a reason behind them? Is everything, all the tests there that you would expect to be there? For qual, are the arguments aligned? Do they make vivid use of verbatim, etc.? Their quotes, are they showing us the data? Is their processes for data collection clear? And especially important for qualitative approaches, is their researcher reflexivity accounted for? Is their own bias here accounted for? In the discussion, don't just repeat the results. Quite often we reject articles because they don't have a discussion. They just think the results are the results, here you go. We need the authors of the papers to build the results into that bigger discussion that we talk about. That's the author's job. But if they've not done it, or if they've done it but not quite to the extent that you were hoping for in the paper, prompt them towards that. Tell them what's missing. Tell them what would help that discussion pull our understanding of entrepreneurship forward. And a conclusion. Let's not have the conclusion go on and on and on. The conclusion should get to the point. What are the limitations of the study? Yes, but what is it that this paper has added? That's what you, as a reviewer, that's what you're looking for. By far, the most important thing that I look for as a reviewer is what is the contribution to our understanding. Not just did you do a clever method, not just did you conduct very, very good structural equation modeling. That's fine, but anyone can do that by following a few YouTube videos and pulling together a good procedure. But what do your findings contribute to our understanding of entrepreneurship? And even as a reviewer, if you disagree with the findings, that's fine. You can disagree with the findings as long as the findings contribute something. Do they contribute to our discussion? It doesn't need to be world-changing, but we do try to avoid taking articles that don't offer anything new. And what is it new about what they're offering to us? This contribution should be made clear by the authors. I'm going to speed up just a little bit here because I want to get to speak to you guys a little bit as well, either in the chat or on the mics. Just a quick word about revisions. When you first do a review with us, you'll be reviewing the paper, then submitting your review. If the article gets rejected, you'll never see the article again, not for our journal anyway. But if the decision has been a revise and resubmit for the authors, then the authors should be learning from the editor's comments. I will also give comment on the paper, but they should mostly be learning from your comments as the reviewer. So learn from the reviewers. The author should not be disheartened by your comments. They should be encouraged to further develop. As a reviewer, you're not wrong because you are the reader of the work. So nothing you say can be wrong. If you've misunderstood something, that's the paper's fault, but you need to point out where maybe that understanding has gone wrong. Authors, when it's rejected, they'll redraft the paper for another journal. They won't be resubmitting to the journal. That's the rules of the game for all journals. If it's a revision, they will respond to your comments. So make your comments something that they can respond to. And you'll get a letter, you'll get a table, usually it's a table, with how the author has responded to the comments you've made. When you get that revision and when you get that response from the authors, the decision can still be rejected at that point. But typically that's when we get into the realms of this paper is heading in the right direction. But again, that's not necessarily your call. You can recommend at that point, at the second review, you can recommend whether that then becomes a rejection or an acceptance, or you can recommend that actually it needs more revision further than that. It's not your call necessarily, it's your recommendation, and the editor takes a recommendation from the 2 or 3 reviewers. Just so you know, this isn't necessarily for digesting as information, but our rejection rate is about 9% currently. It's come down a little bit. Our rejection rate, our acceptance rate. Our rejection rate therefore is 91%. Our acceptance rate is 9%. So we are rejecting a lot of papers. Normally, desk rejection deals with the vast majority of them. The associate editor has made the decision to reject the article, or the editor-in-chief has made the decision to reject the article. When it gets to review, still we're getting a very high rejection rate there. It's a double anonymized reviewing process. So as a reviewer, you will never see who the author of the article is until the article is published and you recognize it. But the author will never find out that you have reviewed their paper and you've been the one providing the reviews. And we keep that very tight. Our average decision speed, 31 days to the initial decision. That means that your review is typically expected within about a 2-week period, so that we've got that time after all the editorial stages. And then from a final decision, maybe after a revision process, takes a little bit longer, 48 days to final decision, because the editors frankly take a little bit more time in making sure this is the final decision for the paper, usually if it's an accept. That rejection rate is high, but it's also normal for the game. Most journals, most high quality journals, have that kind of rejection rate. All right, next steps. I realize I'm pushing on time a little bit, but next steps before I open it up to any questions or experiences. You've all come on this call because you're interested in being a reviewer for the journal, and we are delighted at that. We want more reviewers. We want more mixed reviewers. We want to diversify our reviewer pool. There's a habit that we have of maybe relying on the same reviewers again and again. So we want to do that, and we want to give you that opportunity. We're going to put up a call for reviewers, and that's what the QR code is here. It's you can nominate yourself to be a reviewer for the journal. Give us a little bit of your details experience. I think it takes less than 2 minutes to fill out the little survey that we've got on the QR code. And then you become available. We'll see that as you becoming available as a reviewer. Now, if you've never reviewed before, which a lot of you might be in that position, I guess we're announcing today, or we're starting what we're calling the Reviewer College. So if you nominate yourself through the QR code and you become a reviewer from the journal, we will give you a live review to do. We'll give you an actual review to do on an actual paper submission. But we will also review your review, if you like, and we'll give you some individual editorial feedback on your review. What you could have done better with the review, what you maybe done too much. Did you maybe spend too much time reviewing? Did you maybe give too much detail, done more work than was necessary? So we'll give you some feedback on that. That's something personally I've never had as a reviewer, is feedback on my reviews. And we think it's missing from the field. And we think this could be really useful in just helping people become better reviewers, maybe better authors, and generally just helping people become better scholars. This will also help you take part in the ongoing discussion of quality in entrepreneurship research. We're going to have follow-up sessions with you, more bespoke sessions, more discussion sessions around if you get involved in this reviewer college, around what have you seen in the work? How can you how can we think about things in the future? How can we develop what we're looking for in our reviews? So being part of this could be very useful, and it will help us build a community of our reviewers around the journal, and that's what we'd love to do. We'd love to push this forward. So please, right now, please, if you're interested, go on the QR code, fill out the very, very short survey, give us some of your details. Please use your institutional email as much as you can. That's what Sage kind of demand of us, if you like, is institutional email addresses in that survey. And what we'll do is we'll start communicating with you around how to get involved in this reviewer college. We'll have more live events like this, maybe less open and less formalized, but more like discussion events. And we'll have that personalized individual feedback on your initial review with your actual review work, which should be very interesting. Final thing I wanted to say just before I'm going to pull down the slides and open up. I see we've got a couple of questions coming in. A lot of the advice that I put up in the slides that you'll get came from Sage's own reviewer's guide. I found it quite useful. I didn't find it perfect. I think it orientates more towards the American style, and it orientates more towards the quantitative types of papers. But I think there's still some very useful stuff in there. If you're wondering, well, how do I even begin to question a paper? How do I begin to ask, is this paper good or not good? There's some useful stuff in there. It's only about 4 or 5 pages long. You can get it on the Sage website, but it's there for you. The link is also in the slides for you once you get the slides. So I believe that's the end of the slides. I hope that walkthrough of the review process and what we expect from the review process was at least somewhat interesting and insightful. We would love to have you as a reviewer for the journal. We'd love to get you more involved with the journal and broaden that pool. From our perspective, it broadens our pool of reviewers, and that's useful for us as editors, but also for you, getting you more involved, getting your voice more heard in how entrepreneurship research is pushing forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause there. I'm going to now go on to the chat, Diane, and maybe take some hands from the participants that are here as well, and see what we've got for discussion. I appreciate we scheduled this for an hour, so if any of you have to drop off now, we would fully understand as well. So please feel free to drop off.
Thank you very much, James. Really, really insightful. I'm going to stop recording now, and then to give you just the open space to be able to ask whatever questions that you want in an open way. Thank you.
I see a question came in on AI.